It's a form of treatment aimed at relieving emotional distress and mental health disorder. In our culture, we don't like to talk about our pain. But today we declare that we're gonna get on one accord and we're gonna start some healing. Let's talk about it. Dark places, thoughts racing round and round it goes as I fall down into your hands. My tears falling, I'm calling, Lord, please take this pain as I could drown. Bring me back to land. And I never thought of need you as much as I do now. Bring me back to life. You always intended for me to not be bound. I would trade it all for someone who finally understands me. To have joy and peace and happiness, I wanna be set free. I need you and therapy. Lay it at your feet. Each session patiently. My three-part harmony already changing me. One step closer to I give it all to you. Physically, mentally, captured in your therapy. Therapy. I need you and therapy. Hallelujah. Therapy. Devon, can you help me say it?
Heart beating, fast breathing, second of my life, flashing now.
And I ask myself,
will it be over soon?
Come on, there's been times with my
mood changing,
my mass training,
back to hiding I go.
And then I tell them,
nothing's wrong.
Over and over, I just
use my last excuse.
Come on, you need help say it.
And I never thought I needed you as much as I do now. Bring me back to life. Oh, it's easier for me to not be back.
I would trade it all for someone
I would trade it all.
To have joy and peace.
Joy and peace.
I want to set free. I need you and I lay it. You says it patiently. A three-part harmony already changing me. One step closer to my destiny. Physically, mentally, captured in your. I lay at your feet. He's such a passion. Set my three-part harmony. Said already changing me. One step closer. Say it. I get it. Oh, what peace we often forfeit when we don't take it to the Lord and pray. Said I searched all over. I couldn't find nobody else like you. Yes, Lord. Submit yourself to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. All to thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. Therapy, love me, therapy, hey, love me, therapy, and restore me. Come on, let's declare it together. Put your hand on yourself and say, heal me. Therapy. Yeah, mold me. Therapy. Deliver me. Oh, therapy.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have an excellent panel discussion that is coming today regarding our youth and their mental health. First, I would like to introduce myself. I am Erika, and I am the newly appointed youth minister here at First Christian. And I'd like to also introduce you to the panelists that we have tonight who are here to speak with us. Today we have Danielle Crankfield, and she is a professional school counselor for Crofton High School. We have Quincy Caldwell. He too is a professional school counselor for Glen Burnie High School. And we have none other than FC3's own Minister Janine McCall, who is the LCPC and board approved clinical supervisor. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, no problem. So the First Christian has been in this thing about getting people healed. This has definitely been the year for that. And I think that's our mission, whether it's healed health-wise, healed mentally, healed physically. So tonight, of course, you all are here because you all deal with children on a regular, and you definitely deal with those that either just mental health in general, whatever that may be. So just to give a little bit, tonight we're trying to break the stigma, basically. I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We're trying to break the stigma of what it really means to get counseling, to seek help, and to know that it's okay if you're not okay, right? It's okay for the therapy. It's okay for all of that. And we definitely want to make sure that for our children that they know and that their parents know too that it is all right to get all of the above. So, just to give a little bit about what you all, oh, first, sorry. First, let me say this to all of our viewers. I want to say thank you for being here as well. As we continue on this conversation, if you have any questions, please put it into the comments because we want to make sure that we answer anything that you might have, any concerns that you might have. We want everybody to leave with the tools that you need for if whether it's your niece, cousin, whoever. But we want to make sure that you have the tools that you need. And please share out this live because we don't know who it may help in the long end. So I'll put out this first question. And the first thing is with the profession that you all are in, what are you all seeing? So like what are you seeing coming into your offices at school? And Janine, for you, what are you seeing coming into your office at work? So let's go. We'll start with Danielle if you're okay with that.
That's fine. So I am seeing high levels of anxiety, higher than I've seen in years past, and panic. I'm seeing a lot of students really struggle with their anxiety being so high that they struggle to come down from that. I'm also seeing increased lack of motivation,
Okay.
which can lead to some signs of depression. So I'm seeing a lot of not just sadness, but just some apathy. Total, I don't want to, I don't care. It is what it is. And although that might seem like just a attitude, that's what it like some people that kid has an attitude, that kind of thing. It's really just a sense of purposelessness
Okay.
in their everyday existence. And it does contribute to some negative some maladaptive behaviors and some mental health struggles.
Okay. Thank you. Quincy, what about you?
Similar patterns. I'm seeing a lot of students who are very anxious. And, during the pandemic, we were hearing a lot of stories of students in isolation, dealing with depression, because of that isolation, and really needing that social interaction. Um, and now it's like the opposite end of the spectrum where they come into a school like mine that has multiple buildings. It's very wide, and it's a lot of, open space. And now they're overwhelmed. So it's like one extreme of being isolated and feeling, having those feelings of depression. And now we kind of open Pandora's box and you're all the way on the other end of the spectrum where it's everything's going on around you and it becomes overwhelming and it becomes too much. And in some cases, those students want to go back to, being online because we did have a population of students that were quite, they were fine with being online. you know, and we do have like online academies in our county, you know, to cater to those students. But, you know, we did have quite a few that thought that they were ready for the transition, but weren't. And when they did come back to school, it was too much, and they came and seeked out our services in a lot of cases. A lot of the counselors were saying the same things, that we were seeing exorbitant numbers of students who were feeling the same way.
Okay. Thank you. What about you, Janine?
Well, it's a mixture of both. So both what Danielle and Quincy are seeing, because I'm a funnel, right? So whatever, getting referrals from schools, hospitals, pediatricians, we're seeing the mixture of that. So we're seeing a lot of generalized anxiety coming through with the kids. The other thing too, we're struggling because this format is not proving to be the best for therapy for our young people. So because everything is in flux the way that it is, the up and down, we're now facing the new challenge of whether or not therapy via telehealth is best suited for the child, and finding appropriate referrals for what the child may need. So we're seeing that in a lot of dual diagnosis. So you have a child with ADHD, and then now the anxiety that's now being intertwined with everything that's going on. This is hands down not the best format for a child who's ADHD. And then we're also seeing a lot of referrals for under 5, which is a challenge because we don't have many clinicians on site that are play therapists or art therapists. So talk therapy doesn't work for a child under 5 years old. So it's a challenge. So our waiting list was we just did a purge, but we had over 30 some odd at least. And the majority of them are kids, adolescents, right? So we are seeing an influx, but we are my staff, like I have a staff of 20, 19 under me. And each of those clinicians carry a caseload of anywhere to 20 to 30 clients. So you imagine if we have a wait list that we just cleared from December, right? You imagine how many more, and we're still getting influx of evaluations for referrals coming in. So it's anxiety coupled with some of the dual diagnosis of the ADHD, a lot of trauma, because we know trauma, if you're not trauma informed, people are misdiagnosing. And so this influx of, okay, we went from nothing, it went from isolating and then being siloed to now, okay, we're going back, then, oh, nope, we're coming back, nope, then we're going back. So anything, too fast, too soon, or too much is traumatic. And so we're seeing a lot of that happening as well, too. But it takes a trauma-informed person to understand and to properly diagnose that as well.
So in some ways, it sounds like what we as adults go through, they're going through as well, but they might not always have the words to say it. And then they're forced into this new norm. I hope, okay. I hope I'm not like making it up, but that's exactly what it sounds like.
That's exactly it.
Okay. So like, are you all, but kind of piggybacking off of kind of what you said, Janine. So you guys, are you seeing like they were already coming in with some trauma and then you pile COVID on top and now it's bigger? It has y'all facial expressions are killing it. I can see the worry and the tiredness.
Because it exacerbates everything that we already, I mean, speaking for myself, I already have a population of students that would visit me, on a fairly regular basis. And, that population was relatively small, but it's like now you take those kids that have pre-existing issues and you couple it with, all of the different things that they're going through as it relates to, COVID and the pandemic and again, the isolation. So those kids are especially triggered.
Okay.
And it really we're really seeing some behaviors that, for us as school counselors, we have to, refer out and make sure that they are seeking the proper counseling, to really do a deep dive into some of the issues that they're dealing with.
Okay.
And briefly, we had
And then we send it to Minister Janine. That's
Oh
right.
yeah, yeah, and then of course, on the other end of the spectrum. So you had those kids who were in isolation and who struggled. Then you had those who were introverted or had some social anxiety, and COVID provided a camouflage or a safe haven for their maladaptive coping skills to kind of continue to metastasize. And so then clinicians were forced to try to or confronted with how were they going to address the social anxiety within a COVID safe manner, right? So hats off to the Quincy's and the Danielles, because we didn't get a break, and I just want to go on the record. I need everybody to understand we were the answer. We were the ones that everybody ran to. Okay, so when this thing first hit its peak and everybody was excited about their time off, we didn't get that. What we got was an influx, and we got heavy, and the energy was heavy, and it was trying to figure out creative ways to make this work. Because when you're a healer, it pains you to be across from someone and know that they have an issue that you could help if things were different. Right. And then that coupled with the fact if their home environment.
Right.
Oh. Yes.
Oh.
Okay. So it was layers upon layers upon layers. So in many ways, the return back to school provided some type of haven. Some type of escape for some of my clients whose home environment was just problematic, to say the least. So it's a compounded issue here. And then you only get them, for me, 40 minutes once a week, sometimes twice, right? And then they're reinserted back into an environment that is overwhelmingly chaotic. And so to your earlier point, Minister Erika, yes, they are going through what we're going through as adults, and they're just not as refined. They do not have all the skills acquired to cope with it. And so now we're seeing them turning to alternatives, and social media amplifies some of these in very, real ways. So
oh Lord, the therapy tips from TikTok, the Instagram post to tell you how to deal with your issues, quote unquote. What's that thing they said? I'm emotionally damaged. Oh, that's what the kids are all going around saying now. I am emotionally
so basically
damaged.
you're telling us you're telling us not to listen to TikTok and Instagram.
What I'm saying is run those tips by somebody that has learned a few things to make sure that those things will actually help you and not harm you.
Right.
Get it vetted. Just get it vetted. But I think the thing that I have always stood on is when I know my students have a outside therapist, is getting that records release signed. Because if you're doing certain coping strategies in therapy and that kid is coming to me, so Janine gets the kid 40 minutes a week, that child is probably in my office 15 minutes a day. If I, on my highest level, my tier 3, this is as high as it can get. And so if I know what Janine is doing in therapy, then I can mimic it.
Okay.
And we can talk about, Janine and I can talk about what's going on with this specific kid. And as we reinforce the skills in school, because it's real time when they need the skills, then it improves the child's mental health. They're using the coping strategies. They know that they have a team of people. They're not alone. They can, use the tools that they're being given. And so one of the things that is a struggle is getting parents to sign that form sometimes because they're like, I don't want y'all in my business. It's not about your business, baby. It's about your child getting what they need in each segment of their life. Like, we can't be talking about, in therapy, you're talking about the social anxiety, then you come to the social place. And I'm asking the child, okay, so what are you talking about with your therapist? And the kid's going to say, I don't know. They didn't teach me anything. Now, I know that's a lie from the pit, but that's what the child is saying in the moment because their anxiety is through the roof, right? So I have to, if I have that partnership with the social worker, the counselor, the therapist that's outside of school, then we can work together to help that child come to a solution. So sign the records release, y'all.
Right. And
Promise
that's
you won't
why
cross your personal
pla-
business.
platforms like this are good because it has a tendency. Well, what I've observed is that it has a tendency to be our community. Sometimes, some of my students who are going through therapy, when I do need that record release in other communities, I don't get as much resistance.
Okay.
But within our community, I get some. I don't get a whole lot, but I do get some. And more often it's within our community because we have that. It's kind of ingrained in our culture to keep things in house. And so occasionally I do get pushback, but for the most part, parents are pretty open to allowing us to have that communications because they know that it's going to benefit their child. Like it's not
Yeah.
us doing or saying anything that's going to harm them or us gossiping or anything like that. It's us
Right.
really working together because
Mhm.
what I tell parents is your child needs a network.
Mhm.
And that network includes obviously you, it includes other relatives that they're close with, but we see your child on a large portion of the day. And so they're coming to us, they're coming to their teachers, they're coming to their counselors. And so we all need to communicate to strengthen that network so that when the child falls, we can hold them, you know. But if we're not in communication, and that's why one of the first questions I ask is, do they have a connection with the teacher? Is there somebody that they go to? So I can then talk to that teacher and see, you know, what's been said, have conversations about, you know, um, triggers and things like that they've
Mhm.
observed in the classrooms. And I think that the more people know about the child and what they're going through, the stronger that network can be, the more supports are in place so that when if that child has a real breakdown, you know, they're the proper supports are in place to help them.
So that true African proverb of "it takes a village to raise a child"
Right.
really applies
It really
in
does.
this
Absolutely.
situation.
It really
Absolutely.
does. It really
Completely.
does.
Because the kids, if they're really in a traumatic experience, they don't hold back. Like they will go to where they feel comfortable. And in some cases it exacerbates again the trauma when they can't get to their parents
Okay.
Mhm.
because for whatever reason maybe the parents either says no in some cases or they just can't. They're at work, and coming to get their child can impact their employment status. Like, and
Mhm.
so we all need to be on the same page.
Okay. Okay. So I yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot right there. So for example, so I do want to say this. I do see everybody's question. If you do have questions, continue to post them in the chat. I do see them, so I'll make sure that we get to them. But for the parents, I have two-part questions. Let me start with the first part. So how can we help a child that might be scared to come to you all in school? Like, are there steps that they can take that makes it a little easier for them to get an appointment with you all? I can just go based off my high school experience, which was years ago, and you could ask me who my counselor was. I have no idea. Like I couldn't even begin to tell you.
Mhm.
So how can a child, like, do they have to make an appointment in the office? How does that work?
So, okay, at my school, we have posters with QR codes in every single classroom that has each counselor's Bitmoji on it and our email addresses, and you can scan it to make an appointment with us. And that appointment comes to it's a Google form that they fill out. It comes to all of our emails, and when it's not scheduling season, we see that kid within 24 hours. And so we
Wow.
tell the kids, like, if it's not an emergency, but you have something you want to talk to us about, fill out that form. And on that form, they can indicate whether it's an academic concern, a personal social concern, or they want to talk about something related to career post-secondary. And so we have that. And then I have certain kids that have what we call flash passes or crisis passes. And it's simply all they have to do is whip it out and roll. The teachers know that they have a crisis pass and they come to the school counseling suite. And on that pass, our school psychologist, we collaborated to put different coping strategies on that pass. So there's grounding techniques, there's breathing techniques on that pass, so that if we're not available, like say I already have a kid in my office, but one of my kids use their flash pass, they can sit out with the school counseling secretary and use their strategies. And the school counseling secretary is instructed to remind the kid to use the strategies on the pass until we can get to that student. So so that's another way. Sometimes we tell students to I tell my kids that don't have a flash pass because they don't necessarily need a flash pass, but sometimes different things happen to tell your teacher. Teachers know, call our office. And if I got to come down, I'm coming down. If you need to come up, you can come up because we're on the 3rd floor. So that's why I said that. Really weird school layout, but it's cool. And then, for some kids that struggle to talk to me, I meet them where they are. So if I know that they, like, for example, at my old school, had a kid that really struggled to talk to me because of just different trust issues. And so what I did was I wrote him a note on a Post-it, and I said, look, I see you. I know that something traumatic just happened. And if you want to talk, we can talk. If you just want to sit in my office and scream or not talk to me, but you just need a break from this space, you can do that. Wrote that on a Post-it, put it in front of them. Next thing I know, the kid's in my office.
Wow.
And so it's different creative ways you have to do things sometimes. There's systems, of course, because you got to have systems in school. You know what I mean, Quincy? You don't have a system, everybody falling apart, the walkies are going off. But there's other creative ways too to get to kids. And one thing that I know we make an effort to do as school counselors is be a presence in the school.
Okay.
So my kids don't just see me when I'm scheduling. We're in the classrooms once a quarter. We started with English classes. We're in there once a quarter teaching lessons. We're on, we have a podcast. Like, we make ourselves known in the building so that when something happens, a kid is less likely to feel like, oh my gosh, I can't talk to this person. Like, if you've never seen me before, what you gonna talk to me for?
Yeah, there's nothing to say.
No. Like, even if you need to talk, I'm the last person you're going to talk to because I'm just a lady that sits in the office who makes sure that you check that you graduate on time. That's what a guidance counselor would have done. And a school counselor, baby, you going to see me because I'm out here.
Right.
And so that's my ways I can think of right now. There's a whole bunch of other ways, but those are the top.
Well, that's
I'm taking some mental notes because there was a couple good ideas that
I got you, Quincy. You just email me.
Yeah, I'm taking some mental notes. Yeah, we advertise throughout the school. There's a link that goes to our website that they can make appointments through that. But one of the other ways that, in addition to what Danielle was talking about, we have what's called a Gopher Block, and I think most schools have some version of this, if I'm not mistaken. And for us, our mascot are gophers, so they call it Gopher Block. But basically, it's a free segment of time during the day where students can basically, I don't want to say left to their own devices, but they have options to go to different places in the school. So if they need to make up work or revisit some instruction that they didn't quite understand, they have this opportunity during that block of time to go visit with the teacher to do that. We also have open spaces where they go to the media center. They also get their lunch during that time. So it's an hour span of time divided in half. And during the first half, we call white block. They can go see a teacher, do whatever they want to do. They have to go somewhere. And then the bell rings, and then the second half of that period of time is called red block, and then they can go to another location. During those times, we have like kind of open door policy, and if we're not on duty, because it fluctuates, so we may have red block duty, and then on white block we are available. Those times are advertised, and then at different places throughout the school, a student can touch base and say, when is Mr. Caldwell available? Is he available during white block, red block? And it really doesn't fluctuate for us. Let me correct that. It's the same time during that period. And during that time, they can come to see us whenever. It's kind of like open door. We can talk about if you're going through some issues, if you want to talk about your schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And so different schools, I think, do have different versions of that. That's just one thing that we do. And then just being available, and like Danielle was saying, during that time when I'm on duty, that's the best time for me to grab my kid. Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Hey, you were supposed to come see me the other day. I didn't see you. What's going on? Nope. Follow me to my office now. I'm about to leave. Go to my office now. I got you. Let's go. Let's talk. And then also the parents, making the connection with parents. And if we have a student that suffers from these, anxiety and things like that, if the parent is, if at all possible, maybe at least one day for the parent to come in with the student and make that transition easier for them, typically works very well also, because they can see the connection is there, and that introduction gives them some level of comfort to make the transition.
Okay, thank you. And Janine, does the same kind of work for you? I guess yours. How does yours work? Or someone wants to see you.
Yeah. So if they want to have a therapist, we have a website, and their parents or a referral source would be able to input the information, and then we would follow back up to get all of that information. Currently, there was new legislation now where the age of consent has now dropped.
Okay.
And we thank God.
Yeah. So that has removed some of the barriers that, probably Quincy and Danielle are seeing, where they don't necessarily have, if there's the issue severe enough where a guidance counselor or school counselor sees it, but the parent is giving resistance, now the child, if under the discretion of the school counselor, can submit a referral for us. Now, we navigate that terrain very, cautiously, because we have to look at it from a wide lens view, right? So we're not trying to make an enemy out of the client's guardian, right, or parents, because ultimately you live with them. So we move through that very cautiously. But if all things are created equal and the parents are on one accord, then they would just submit a referral. We contact them. We follow back up with them, make sure. Now, for my agency, we do state-issued insurance providers right now, or self-pay. So provided all of those things would line up, then they would be contacted by a diagnostic clinician who would then meet with the client and the family. And then upon completion of that, they would subsequently be assigned a therapist. And then that would be the beginning of that work there. Okay. Though, however, because a lot can transpire between the eval and actually assignment to a therapist, every diagnostic clinician does not leave that session without providing the family with the mobile crisis unit. So that should something transpire in between that window of time, they have a point of contact. Now, once the client is assigned, then we continue to kind of reinforce that with like the crisis text line support that's 24/7 for you who can text as well, along with that mobile crisis unit, so that they're armed with other resources if it's after hours and talking to their parents and their therapist or school counselor is not an option. They still have access to that. So provided, however we kind of compile these resources, we can make sure we get that out to the families as well.
Okay. Just to answer one of the questions in the comments, it says, what school system are you working with? And for Danielle and Quincy, they both work in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. So I just wanted to answer that part. So we're going to go off into just a little bit more. So and I'm going to start with you on this one, Janine. For parents, are there some signs that they can see or look at to see if there's a change in their child? If it's more than just them being a teenager or a child, as opposed to, okay, they really need to sit down and talk with somebody.
Yeah. Well, first things first, parents today need to realize using what you did as a standard of measure is not going to work, because children today are not doing what we did or what they did, right? Oh, you all up in your room and this, that, and the third. Well, it's a different type of world, right? So, our youth today are not just out in the streets, playing red light, green light. That's not what they get down with. Okay. It's the newest TikTok challenge or whatever. So the first order of business is going to be stop using what you did as a standard of measure. Okay. what's going to be your best friend at this point is to pay attention to your child's regular routine. Then any deviation from that is an indication that what else is going on. So if your child's baseline is that they normally are kind of keeping to themselves, or they're on the phone, or they're in their phone often, but then you see a pivot where they're not even on the phone as much, or they're not eating as much, you have to establish the baseline of what your child's normal way of being and doing, and then any deviation from that is going to give you some red flags, right? That would be my biggest kind of thing, because much of the challenge that I'm having with my families that are coming in, and as I'm working with my staff and them connecting with their clients and their clients' families, is connected to the fact that many parents want to do this. Hey, you fix them. They're in your care. Like, we can just sprinkle fairy dust, and then bam, after 2 sessions with me, they're going to be all together. Well, what do they say? That math ain't mathing? They've only been with me for 2 weeks. That ain't enough time compared to how many years they had underneath your domain. So first things first, if there's a concern, you have to be open to consider what's happening and the role you play in facilitating that. And that is a hard thing to do. So back to Quincy's statement earlier about this network. It's important that parents understand that your child is not always going to use you as, sorry, I frozen. I didn't want to keep talking and it was frozen. Okay. Your parent, in all instances, your children may not always use you as the go-to. So it's important that you have a network established of adults who you respect and who you believe respect how you do what you do. And a good example for that, for those watching, my parents watching, I want you to think about the Holy Trinity. God in three persons is an example of three distinct personalities all on the same page. So if you could get into an agreement with a group of adults who you trust and who your children can connect and trust, then you know that when you're not the answer, the adults who are in proximity that you trust and they trust can be that stand-in. So sometimes we connect with God the Father. Other times Jesus is my homeboy, he's my brother. And then the other time, Holy Spirit comes in and comforts. So God in three persons with three distinct personalities who show up and meet our needs in accordance to what we have going on. And so the first point is establish your baseline. The second part is pay attention to the fact that your children may have something going on and you may in fact be the reason. So if you're not open to that, then that's a barrier right there. And then do not shy away from those supportive resources that can create that kind of coordination of care between the school, between other trusted adults at the church or at work or whomever who you have interfacing with your children, so that you are kind of working collaboratively to kind of address what concerns may be popping up, and then listen to your child. Don't just be listening to respond, but actually hear what they're saying so that you can actually put some things in place to respond accordingly. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox.
Where is the offering plate?
You said it all, though.
Right. We shouted. You just gave us a word to shout off of, and you made us look in the mirror all at once. But no, that makes a lot of sense, and I could see you and Danielle and Quincy. I could see you all just shaking your head in complete agreement to all of that.
Right.
So
because Janine is right. I can't tell you how many times a student has come to my office and said, "I can't talk to my parents about this because insert reason here." And a lot of it goes back to they don't feel heard in their homes. And they get responses like, "You don't have nothing to be depressed about."
Yeah.
Right.
As soon as those words fall out of your mouth,
you lost them.
They're not talking to you about it anymore.
Right.
Worried, anxious. You don't even know how to spell anxious. Why'd you want to be anxious? Done. When we're speaking to our children, we have to use our words carefully, because the minute we say something that negates how they feel, they are shut off from us.
And just to piggyback off of that, you got to understand their point of reference.
Mm-hmm.
Your point of reference as an adult is much broader than theirs. And so what they're dealing with to you doesn't seem like a big deal because your spectrum of life and everything that you deal with is so much bigger. And so, so many times I get that from parents, and I do have to kind of shrink it down and say, eliminate all these other things that exist in your life now and shrink it down to when you were a teenager. So don't talk about the issues that paying bills and this and that. Like, shrink it down. You weren't paying bills. Well, some of them, some students might have, but for the most part, you weren't paying bills. When you were their age, you didn't have a boss that got on your nerves when you were their age. Or you didn't get along with your coworkers. Or all of these different things that, as adults, add stress to our lives. And we think because they're not dealing with this big, broad spectrum that we're dealing with, that they don't have anything to worry about. But you got to shrink it down to their world. And within their world, they do have a lot of stressors. They do have things that they worry about. And yes, their friends are going to, play a large factor in that because that's a large portion of the pie.
That's their
that
world.
is their world. So if you were to look at it from a percentage standpoint, how much of your world is consumed by those people who are your friends? How much of it is consumed by social media? How much of it is consumed by your schoolwork? You know what I'm saying? And once you shrink it down to that point, then you have an understanding of where they're coming from, because if a big portion of what you go through revolves around, your whole social life revolves around those two things, your friends and social media, and there's issues there, then you can understand why they panic, why they go into flux, why if their friends if there's any issues, as it relates to their friends, it creates trauma for them. They don't have those other outlets because those are the things that they depend on. And we can't just tell them to, well, get over it. Like, friends come and go. That's your point of reference as an adult. You had friends when you were in school, and now as an adult, some of those people you barely know, and some of them are still your good friends. But they have what they have within their subjective world, and their subjective reality, and you have to operate within that circle and not broaden it to your adult life, because that's not their point of reference.
Right.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
And also just want to throw that out. They're going to watch what you do. So how you cope, they'll cope. How you avoid, they'll avoid. How you get distracted, they'll get distracted. So some of the best things that you could do is model good behavior. That's half this part of counseling. The counseling room is a microcosm of the larger world. So what we do in the counseling room is try to model for them stress tolerance skills, how to model proper coping mechanisms. So if your child is showing up in a way that you're like, I just don't understand, your children in many instances are a mirror of you.
So basically, everybody is going to counseling at the end of the day.
Yes.
Everybody needs to go to counseling.
Individual and family.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yes.
Yes.
If your child is going through some issues, it would be wise to not just focus on them, but to open it up and to see. And then it goes back to what I was talking about before, not wanting people to be in your business, but if you want your child to open up and to really address the things that they're going through, and for it to be a healthy, safe environment for them, you're going to have to open up that world. Because I got to be honest with you, some parents, you don't want to talk about these things, but your kids talk about them anyway. They do.
They do.
And so you might as well open the door all the way open and be receptive to having those conversations so that your child feels comfortable in that environment, communicating and working towards being able to address some of their problems in a safe space.
Gotcha.
And I think the one thing that I definitely want to get out there is watch how you share your expectations for your child's future with your child.
Okay, let's hit that.
Because I see so many students They come in, they're like, my parents say I need to take all these AP classes. My parents say I need to have a 4.0. My parents say I need to be a doctor. My parents say, and then when I ask them what they want, their answer is, I don't know. Sometimes when a kid says, I don't know,
It's
they
okay.
truly don't know
It's
because
okay.
they've been right. But also we've dictated so much of their steps as adults that when you ask them what they want, they haven't had enough autonomy to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
They've only taken the classes that they've been told to take. They've only been in the activities that they were told they had to do outside of school. Or they've only done the things that we as adults have said that they needed to do. So they don't know themselves enough to answer the question, well, what do you like? What do you want to do? And that in and of itself brings a lack of motivation, increases stress. So we need to be careful with the language. Like, you might want your child to be a doctor, but what if your child cannot stand the sight of blood? Then what? You've heaped all these expectations on them, and now they feel like because they're not who you want them to be, that they're insufficient, they're a disappointment, all these feelings of low self-worth. So we really have to be careful with, thinking about how our words impact our children.
or the lack thereof. Because
Right.
on my side, I don't get a whole lot of kids who have parents pouring in expectations. It's whatever they want. And then there's the absence of direction as well.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so
that's
then they don't know how to dream because no one even spoke a word to them concerning what was possible. So there is the need to
Balance.
strike a balance, right?
yeah.
And what I hope is that, for the parents looking on, I don't want any of this to come off as a strong critique or bashing at all. But what I hope they walk away from this whole conversation is that everybody everywhere can stand to be more self-reflective, to consider whether or not what we're doing, how we're doing it is the best way for what it is we're trying to do with that particular child. Especially if you're a parent with multiple children, you need to understand that your job is to love your children uniquely, not equally, because each child has a unique makeup that's going to require you to show up in a different kind of way. So what I hope the takeaway is for my parents tuning in is that just to consider, if it stung, then consider why it's stinging a little bit, because we can all grow. The goal here is to evolve. Not, we're not all getting it right all the time, but it's the unwillingness to grow that keeps, children bound, or keeps us bound and reproducing the same pattern behavior over and over again.
So,
And
go
for
ahead.
the parents that may feel like, well, I don't know what to do then. Do I have expectations? Do I not have, it is just having that healthy balance and communication and being flexible.
Right.
Communicating with your child, being able to say to them, look, I do have expectations for you, but let's work together to set those expectations. You know what I mean? So you feel comfortable that we have come together to kind of set them, and then working through those processes, selecting classes and things like that, just to be more specific, to make sure that there is a healthy balance of what they can handle. I think that's very key. But communication is really the thing that's really the binding point between those two extremes. Communicating with your child, having those open conversations, and if you can develop that good relationship and that good connection, you can have those open conversations with them so that they can feel free to express to you, that maybe this class may be too much of a struggle for me, or some of the expectations are a bit too high, but at the same time, you do want to kind of balance it so that they know that you care enough to set those expectations too. So it's just really about that communication and hearing what they have to say.
Right. So to kind of stick on this line, especially with the parenting, how do you all, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do you all deal with children that might come in to see you and the parent doesn't want to be involved? Like there is no involvement at all.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot. You know, in a lot of cases, I will work with the student to do, everything I can within the scope of what I can do as a school counselor, and talk to them about some of the things that they're going through, and provide them with resources that they can tap into themselves. I mean, being in this, age of information, there are a lot of different resources out there for them. And as counselors, we have to kind of vet it because we know that they'll do it on their own. And so, we want to make sure that if we are, maybe guiding them in a direction of certain, information points or places that they can go, that we first have an understanding and a true understanding of what it is and what they're seeing. But there are some resources out there for students to kind of tap into, for help. And we also have all of the like warm line and hotline numbers that they can call if they're feeling extreme, bouts with anxiety and depression that don't involve their parents. Those phone numbers are always available to them.
Yep.
So that they have someone that they can talk to, beyond the, our capacity to reach them in the school, when they're on their own.
Okay.
Yeah. So with my agency, it's in the policy that the parent has to have some level of involvement. That, that's one thing, right? What's on paper versus what happens in real time.
Right.
Okay. So for me personally, I always try to make so I never go through unless the child has come in on their own, sign off on their own consents because there's a specific situation. If the parent has enrolled them, then my communication goes through them for scheduling and following up. And then I try to make it a point to get to know the parent. What do you have on your plate? What's going on? Because when a child is coming to be seen, the client is the unit. So yes, I'm going to be addressing these issues or these ancillary issues that may be coming up, but they're not outside of you. Now, I have had instances where hands down, there's no real engagement, or it's, it never goes past the closed yes, no, we're good. So in those instances, those have been the toughest, but that is really where teaching the concept of radical acceptance to the kids and teaching them how to deal with building their distress tolerance. Meaning, when the situation doesn't change, how do you learn how to just endure? How do you make what is the end goal, and how do we use this as fuel to kind of keep you apprised of what's important? Okay, you got X amount of years in this home until what? So what are we doing now to make sure that when this time comes, you can do what you need to do if there really is a total disengagement and a lack of insight, because insight is necessary for any real shift to change to take place or whatever. So it does require a little bit of finesse. Like some parents are receptive, others have been disengaged, but then ultimately I have to work with the client with where they are, and then okay, the situation is not changing, but how do we endure it? How do we push past it day by day till you get to that end point? And what is the end point? So I use that as fuel to help us figure out what your goal is, and then we hold accountability in terms of goal planning to get you to strategize towards that exit.
Okay.
Yeah,
that was good. So kind of on the trauma, similar on that line, for the parents that do want to be involved and are a little bit more involved, how are they able to distinguish what's going on with their child if, say, it's the trauma is not necessarily visible? Does that make sense?
What do you mean? Because what would bring them to therapy? Or are you talking about if Quincy and Danielle? Because before they get to me.
Yeah, so we can say that before they get to you.
Okay.
For instance, you know how you were talking about earlier, how on the lines of the baseline, right? There's a baseline, but what if the baseline is still a little iffy? They were sleeping first, but now they definitely are sleeping, but that evidence is not as pronounced. Like, how are there questions that can be asked to get them to talk a little bit more, to really kind of see where they are?
Yeah. I think again, going back to what we were talking about before, communication is really the key, and really creating a comfortable environment, for is important so that you know, they can come to you with some of those problems. I mean, one of the big things for us as counselors that has at times, but for the most part, I haven't had too many issues with this. But one of the points for us as counselors is that if a student is harming themselves, someone else, or doing anything that's going to impair their health, I have an obligation to share that with the parent.
Okay.
But beyond that, everything that we talk about is confidential.
Yeah.
Okay.
Occasionally, I get pushback from parents. But the reason why, and I tell parents this all the time when I do get pushback from them, is that you have to understand that your child needs a safe environment to talk about these things. And if I can't provide it, then they're going to resort to places that you probably don't want them to go. They're going to resort to communicating with their friends online and different things that you don't have any control over what's happening there. At least you have a trained professional that's going to talk to your kids about these things. So,
Right.
Creating that environment for them to feel comfortable, that communication is important. It's not going to catch everything, but
Right.
that's one of the main things you want to do first. Yes.
Also, and I'll make sure I give all of this for you to give this out. There are a few self-report questionnaires that parents can access if they want to be able. So like the PHQ is a self-report questionnaire that reviews depression. And it gives a basic list of questions that parents can ask their child to kind of see where they're ranking in terms of their mood over the last few days, the last week or so. Once they answer based on how many yeses they get, that lets them know, okay, based off of this, you might have mild, moderate, or severe rating. Sorry, I don't know if can y'all hear me?
We can still hear you.
Okay, I waited because I see my screen frozen. So that will kind of help them to begin to understand, like self-report what their child is maybe dealing with. The other thing is we've had several parents who just say, hey, I'm not sure what's going on with my child. Can you see them? And if your insurance will cover an initial evaluation where they can talk with a trained professional and get a basic diagnostic evaluation. And at which point the parent will be there because for youth, what typically happens is we'll talk with the client first, the child, and then bring the parent in to kind of get a mixture of both. And then based off of that, the clinician will say, hey, this is what I'm thinking is going on. Would you like us to proceed with kind of submitting this for case assignment for these resources to give to the parents?
Okay.
And so one thing that parents have done is they've emailed me. So like if they notice a change in their kid and they feel like, the kid's not going to talk to me, I'll get an email and say, hey, can you check on insert child's name here? They seem to be a little bit down. Right. And so, and I tell them straight up, like Quincy said, there's confidentiality in my office. So I can tell you I talked to them, but I'm not going to tell you the content of our conversation. And the other thing that I encourage parents to do is use I notice and I wonder statements. So I notice that you're sleeping more than normal. And it makes me wonder what's going on. Have you noticed that you're sleeping more? Because the kid might not even be aware. But simply calling the thing a thing, but doing it in a way that's like approachable and not like, why are you sleeping so much? But more like, I notice that, you're not eating as much as you used to. I wonder what's going on with your appetite, and just see like where that goes in terms of conversation. Those like just that simple little phrase can really get some conversation started, and it's a little bit more approachable.
Right.
Yeah. And a good thing to do now, if you haven't already started, make check-ins with your children a normal part of. So and really listening, right? How is your day? How is everything going with your friends? Like, are you good there? And like genuinely be concerned, right? Because you can preempt it. You don't want to have to be on the back end and be reactive. But if you proactively make it a point to be a part and to listen and to hear, then you will be on the front end of, should there be a shifting, you can kind of pick up on it sooner versus on the back end. So if that's not a normal practice, make it one, just to check in. And realizing that, adolescents are selfish and they're supposed to be. Adolescents are moody and they're supposed to be. So let's not be offended, right? If you're looking to be offended, you will. But your child is going, they're self-absorbed because that's what they're supposed to be. We teach them how to let go of that selfish tendency. So there's just certain things developmentally, I think it would help if you understood what comes along with the stages of development, that would help you not to kind of be like, I wasn't like this, or what's going on? Well, this is a natural part of development here. And don't be afraid to reach out for just support, just for a consult. Hey, is this normal? Is this what's really supposed to be happening? So that you have some context for what you're kind of measuring as you move forward.
Because we see all shapes, sizes, we see it all. We could definitely tell you if this is something that should be concerning to you. Or, and in some cases, I'll be the middleman between something that I know about what's going on with the kid, and then a parent that may reach out to me, where neither one of them know that they both talking to me.
That's always fun. That is always fun.
But just to piggyback too off of Minister Janine, there are also some resources that may be available to students or parents that want to seek counseling, that may be worried about the financial piece and the insurance element. We have a program, and I think it's countywide, called Villa Marie. So that's in Anne Arundel County. I can't really speak for outside the county because I know this is being broadcast to a lot of different places. But I'm sure that they have some programs. So if you want to seek services, you don't know where to start, start with the counselor. So within their county, within the counties, other counties of people who, are listening to this, they may be aware of some other services that may be available for those who are in financial situations where they don't know if they can afford it. But we have a program called Villa Marie in our county that accounts for students or families who may be receiving financial assistance. And Villa Marie for us, and Danielle, it may be a little different. Or do you guys have Villa Marie, correct?
We have Children's Guild, but they provide the therapy service in school. So the therapist provides comes to see the kids in school. We make the referrals. Right.
So talk with your child's counselor, because I think for some parents that is a barrier. Just the idea of therapy, the idea that maybe this is something that I'm not going to be able to afford, or in some cases they don't have insurance. So reach out to the counselors, because there are resources that are available for those who have financial needs. Like for us, it's Villa Marie. For Danielle, it's Children's Guild. If you live in another county and you're listening to this, there may be something else. Talk to the school psychologist, talk to the counselor, and find out. And for us, like I said, with that service, they will come to the school and talk with students. Now, we'll be honest, they do have a wait list.
Is
that the case with you guys, Danielle? Yeah.
So
but
children,
reach out and find out what they are, and find out what steps you can take to involve yourself and your child in some type of therapy service that may be provided for them outside of any kind of financial barriers that you think exist.
And there are several jobs that have employee assistance programs. And if you call, that's ours is a 24-hour hotline, and I believe that most employee assistance programs are 24-hour hotlines. And you call them, you can get therapy services for a certain amount of time. For free. It's a covered part of your employee assistance program. And I think it's like up to 8 weeks of therapy services. And so utilizing that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
utilizing that the EAP that's a part of your benefits package is definitely a way to get some services to your child if, let's say, you don't have medical assistance, so that you can't get the in-school therapy, or maybe you struggle to afford therapy through your health insurance. So if you have EAP, just look into EAP. And the one thing I wanted to say for our parents of younger children is building an emotional vocabulary in your students at a young age is going to really help them when they're older. So helping children to learn what anger feels like, what sadness feels like, what worry feels like, what scared feels like, what happy feels like, what calm and content. And there's so many picture books out right now that can help with that. Even picture books featuring little Black children. It's so cute. I gotta find the links and send them to you, Erika. But there are some really good ways to teach your children an emotional vocabulary. So just like you have a sight word wall, you can have a feelings word wall. And teaching kids facial recognition so that they know, like, when someone else is sad, when someone else is angry, and what that body language is. That helps when your kids get older and you ask them how they feel, they can say, because they know what it feels like in their body. It may be a different trigger because they're 13 and not 5 anymore, but they know what anger feels like in their bodies. So they know that they're angry and they can communicate. I'm angry. I'm really sad. So starting out with your young children and building that emotional vocabulary in them is going to go a long way.
Absolutely.
So for what you were saying, Quincy, is it Villa Marie? Is that the community resources?
Yeah, that's it. That's the counseling service that's offered through our school. You have to be receiving public assistance, actually. But if you follow up with the counselor or a school psychologist at your school, they should be aware of it if it's offered. And like Danielle was saying, for them, it's the Children's Guild. So for the parents, just touch base with the counselor at their school or school psychologist to find out what those resources are at your specific school.
Okay, and we're going to put that in the chat.
And then for my agency, Families First Counseling and Psychiatry, we are in PG, Howard, Montgomery, and Baltimore. So we're all over, and we take state-issued insurance, and we offer sliding scale fees. So if you have state-issued insurance, you can go ahead, Families First Counseling and Psychiatry, go to our website. You can input for the referral, and because we're in telehealth now, we are not bound by county lines. So we have people all the way up to the upmost and all the way down to the southernmost that we meet with. So if that is an issue, definitely look us up and see how we can meet your needs so that finance is not a barrier to you getting quality service.
Another program too is Thrive.
Yes, Thrive.
Oh yes, I heard of
Thrive.
Yeah.
That's one that I refer out to a lot. And our county has to kind of vet what we refer out because they can be held liable.
Okay.
So Thrive is one that we're allowed to.
Yeah.
We're
gonna give you three. We're gonna give you 3 at a minimum places.
Yeah.
Ethically, we got to give you at least 3. Now, whichever one you choose is on you, because that disclaimer gonna be at the top of the email or the
paper. Right.
What you won't do is call Miss Crankfield, be like, "You sent me." No.
We
won't do that.
So we're actually coming to the end of our discussion, but we do have one more question that I would want to bring up that was in the chat, and it was regarding social anxiety. I know that that's a huge thing, even before the pandemic, but definitely with the pandemic that we are seeing. How can parents help with that? How do you help with that?
It's kind of a tough question. That's what everybody thinks.
Right. Because I'm like, I'm sure you can't hold their hand, but how do you give them the okay to do?
Because there's a balance with anxiety, depending on what theory of counseling you subscribe to, there's a balance between exposure and coping and, keeping them away from the triggers. So that's why it's a tough question, right? So with social anxiety, what I've noticed is like helping kids know what to expect as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, the quintessential question, who all gonna be there?
That is real.
I mean, but it's real though, right? Like for some people, I need to know who's going to be there so I can mentally prepare myself. So this person, so we're going here, we're going to go see this person. And you know, how does that make you feel? Like talking through it sometimes helps. And I'm gonna keep thinking about it and let Janine and Quincy answer. Passing the buck. Here y'all go.
I mean, yeah, because it takes different forms with different kids, and it's such a broad thing. It's hard to really give you one pathway to addressing it. But you know, a lot of what it boils down to is control. So it alludes to what Danielle was saying. That lack of control for some students just creates that angst. And so making them feel comfortable with where they're going, what they're doing as much as you possibly can is key. Helping them to understand what their triggers are is also something that I have a lot of conversations with my students about. Sometimes their triggers are internal. Today, I actually dealt with a student, and we were talking about this earlier, where sometimes the trigger can be in their mind. And so it's hard for other people to get it because they're crying uncontrollably. My student today was just crying uncontrollably. And because I was used to dealing with her, she felt comfortable with me because I wasn't going to judge the fact that she couldn't stop crying. She didn't know why. And she was just in this space, you know, heart beating fast. And, you know, so when she came to my office, on some level, it provided kind of a sanctuary, but she still couldn't stop the crying. But it's trying to help them through what they're going through and understanding it is another thing. So educating yourself as much as possible, but making sure that you're touching base with a professional who can guide you in the right place to educate yourself. You know, helping the student understand their triggers. If they are internal, their mind will start to go to places internally that takes them down a road of having the reaction that you see externally, the crying, the fast heartbeats, the jitters. If the triggers are external, then trying to narrow down what they are, being observant and using those points of when their emotions spike, teachable moments to try to figure out why this happened, where it happened. Is there anything that we can kind of pinpoint that's really triggering you? You know, and helping them through, you know, those issues, helping learn the coping skills that a lot of students, you know, are basic knowledge within the world of therapy, of the deep breathing and the taking the time to decompress and you know, all of those other things. And just one of the things I taught the students about is, you know, exercise. Some students do it, some don't. You know, it's kind of a toss up, but it naturally releases certain endorphins in them that counterbalance some of those issues that come about with anxiety. So finding ways to naturally address, you know, some of those angsty feelings is also good too, because sometimes kids listen to music, you know what I mean? They draw, they color, finding those coping mechanisms for them and something that they feel comfortable with, and having it so the students naturally gravitate to them on their own is also ways in which they can kind of address, you know, what they may be going through too.
Yeah. Everything that they've already mentioned, it does depend on symptom severity. It depends on what modality that the clinician is using. So if I'm coming from a CBT, which is cognitive behavioral, then we're going to look at how they think about the experience, unpacking that, looking at how it's impacting the way they show up or experience the situation, and then coupled with a little bit of exposure therapy. So you're kind of navigating how how much can they take to kind of slowly get them to kind of get acquainted with what comes along with that. The other thing, putting a pin on that, being also very clear whether or not is your child naturally introverted. Is the child an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert? And is this really social anxiety, right? Is it is the child different from you? So are you misdiagnosing or mislabeling what you're seeing because the child is not as extroverted as you? So first, so if the child is truly dealing with social anxiety, then yes, everything that we have kind of detailed, and then grounding techniques. So like a quick thing that we could do. So I would tell if they could find a wall, get their back up against the wall and begin to describe what they feel, orienting themselves to their body being against something hard. Or because the mind struggles to kind of pay attention, I automatically will divert them to look around the room and I need you to tell me 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. And that forces the brain to move from the emotional component to a more grounded framework, and it brings their anxiety down. One of my little kids that I have all these different rocks or marbles, and they get to pick out which one. And if you hold it with you, so they carry it with them all the time. So if they find themselves anxious, they pull in their pocket and then they begin to describe what it feels like. Give me the color, give me the scent. Like, is it smooth? Is it hard? And we walk them through the different questions to ask themselves to help force their brain away from the emotional recesses to the grounding component so that they can level themselves out. With little girls, if they have hair ties, right? If they can pluck at that or look at the color. So a whole bunch of things can be used in the moment to help ground them. But depending on the symptom severity is going to determine whether this is something that needs a qualified clinician, or is this just something that they'll naturally grow out once their confidence and esteem kind of place catch up to where they are. So,
and that grounding technique that Janine just mentioned, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let me tell you how that is a go-to, that is a game changer. When kids are experiencing social anxiety, any type of anxiety, panic, high levels of stress, we can do it. Because sometimes it's not a clinical diagnosis of anxiety or depression. Sometimes we are very stressed human beings. It's and this pandemic has exacerbated our levels of stress to varying degrees. You can do grounding yourself right now, and you might need to. 5 things you see. Get into it. What you see right now, right? That 1 thing you taste, I hope it's not bad breath. Like, get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, progress yourself through those things and then do it. So I tell my kids, do it when you don't need it so that you can remember it when you do need it. Because a lot of times you tell a kid you do the grounding techniques and they'll say, well, that doesn't help me. I said, well, do you practice it?
That's a good one.
Right. Because they have to know those coping skills.
Exactly. It's like, of course, when you need it in the moment, you're not going to remember it if it's not something you do on a regular basis. Or you don't have someone to coach you. But if you do it every day, you're like, okay, 5 things, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then that becomes a go-to. And you can start it with little kids. And I keep trying to throw it back to little kids because it starts there. Our younger babies, teaching them different coping strategies so that they are strong and they can cope with some of the things that come with life's challenges. It really does start with them. And as long as they can count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and even if they can't count, we can help them. 5 things.
They're gonna learn.
They're gonna learn.
You can do YouTube is a free engine for you to also always do. So Erika, they can look up mindfulness meditation or body scan meditations.
Body scan.
Those are perfect, especially to Danielle. So you can put in the age range that you want. Body scan meditation for 5-year-olds, body scan meditation for adults, and it will come up with a slew of things. You can use the Calm app for those who want to pay. Then there's also the Insight Timer that has a slew of free meditations as well. So YouTube, Calm, my Insight Timer, all of those are engines that you can use. The mindfulness is really the key. So whenever we're dealing with trauma, anxiety, any of it, the first thing is mindfulness. And so we move, and mindfulness is not just about sitting still. It is about learning how to pay attention without judgment, so that this is increasing your ability to know what to do when you're stressed. So there are a whole host of different things. I also have a link that I'll give you. It's 80 things to do when you can't afford therapy. So it's a website link that will give you 80 kind of things. And then as a final thing, as a diagnostic clinician, we throw out these words so often, but in order for you to walk out with an actual DSM-5 diagnosis, you have to have the symptom and it have a marked impairment on your daily function. So to what Danielle was saying, like, we all have levels of stress, but if you are still functioning, then it's not a marked, meaning it is a drastic impact that has literally interrupted and disrupted your ability to perform at your optimal level. If that is the case, then you walk out the door with the diagnosis. Okay. So you're not, just because you see me and you say, yeah, I'm presenting with anxiety and this, that, and the third, I might say, well, what happened in the last 6 months? Because it might be adjustment disorder. Right? Your body is struggling to adjust to whatever has happened and is showing up with anxious mood or whatever. So it doesn't always mean you're going to walk out with like, I got it. I know I got generalized anxiety. No.
Come on, self-diagnosis.
Okay. And off of WebMD and you know, come and talk to a clinician. Somebody. Okay. Please. And then we'll let you know. And then what I always tell my clients is, you're not going, when you're ready to discharge from therapy, it doesn't mean you are healed in the sense that you'll never experience the symptom again. We'll know you're ready to transition from therapy when the way you respond has shifted, okay? Because you came in because you had a maladaptive response to what was happening. My job is to help you learn how to respond to it so that when, not if, but when you get triggered, you know how to handle it in a way that it does not take you out of the game. And when you're able to show proficiency in that area, then it is time for you to be transitioned out of therapy. So you don't need to be in therapy for forever, but the goal is to make sure that you've mastered how to do this thing called life, so that when you get triggered, when you have stress, when you feel sadness, when you feel anxious, you know what to pull on from your toolbox so that it doesn't take you out of the game and you're not down for the count.
Right. Because the mind is different than a bone. You know, you break a bone or you pull a muscle or something like that, it's going to heal. And a doctor can typically give you a timeline for when it's going to heal. When you're going through the things that you're going through, it may be a lifetime, you know, and so teaching those skills and having that understanding of what to do is really what therapy is about, and giving you that tool chest. But please stop diagnosing your children.
Please. And don't call your school counselor.
Parents, my child is bipolar. You cannot diagnose bipolarism this early.
No. And you have to be a severe case.
Please do not call your school counselor and ask them for a diagnosis, because what we won't do is put our certification on the line to give you a fake diagnosis.
No, we're not going to do that.
Now, are we trained? Some of us are. Minister Janine. I'm very familiar with the DSM-5. However, what we're not going to do is give you a diagnosis, because we're not screening them. We're not going through the diagnostic process. And furthermore, sometimes you're looking for a label to explain.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the path towards healing.
Right. And that's the most important thing. You know, like, you can make these situations. I see it so often where the diagnoses of your child, you know, does way more harm than good. Like, they come to me and say, my child has this, that, or what's going on. And one of my very first questions is, have they been officially diagnosed? Have they seen a therapist? You know, and you know, it's so important, because you start the child starts to buy into everything that you're saying, because you're their parent, and you know, they're going to trust you or believe you, or even if you don't have the greatest relationship with your child, you're still a point of guidance for them. And so to say these things without having the official diagnoses, can really cause that child to fall right into, some of those problematic areas that, are linked with that particular diagnosis. In a lot of cases, I do have parents who may be going through depression.
Mhm.
They may be.
Mhm.
And because they're going through it, they believe that they're an expert on it. And if their child exhibits anything that they can see that resembles what they go through, their child is depressed. And then we have, and in the clinical world, we call it a symbiotic relationship, where sometimes we have parents who, almost on some level, like talk their kids into having these issues so that they can kind of relate to them and they have a bond with them because of those issues, when that may not be the diagnosis. We have so many kids that tell us that they have anxiety. Your feelings of discomfort may not necessarily be anxiety. We need to diagnose it first. And I even had to stop a parent from saying depressed in a parent meeting, because she was saying, my child, she's depressed, and I said, well, has it been diagnosed? Okay, let's hold off on that. And I had to do it several times in the meeting. And I said, I don't want to dismiss it. Don't get me wrong. I just want it to be official, because I believe that we're planting a seed that this child is watering, cultivating. And the next thing you know, we're going down this road when we really have to have a true understanding of what we're doing first, before we can start to label and start to say this is what the child is going through and having.
And parents, you can, if you do get a diagnosis from a therapist, a psychiatrist, it is your right to ask, what does that mean? To have them talk you through what that looks like, what they're seeing that is qualifying that diagnosis. You can ask for a second opinion. So you don't ever have to walk out of that session feeling like you don't have access to the information that they use to help give you that diagnosis and what that means. So
yeah, it is like I was saying earlier, kind of like the double-edged sword of being in this world of information and being in a world of normalizing mental health. There are way more pros than cons, mind you. I would rather live in this world where we're educated on these things, and as a parent, you can start to see them and recognize them rather than dismissing them and telling your kid to suck it up.
Right.
You know what I mean? But don't diagnose.
Right.
When you start to see it, refer to somebody that is licensed to actually make the official diagnosis, and then operate accordingly.
Well, I definitely have to say you all dropped a lot of jewels just in general, even from the comments that people have been saying. You all have definitely given everybody something to think about and more techniques to even use, down to the mindfulness technique in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm gonna remember that now. I might make it up on my way, but I'm gonna remember 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But I just want to say thank you all for coming tonight. I literally think that this is one of those conversations that can continue to keep going, and I feel like we should keep it going. Not tonight, but I do feel like we should keep it going in some forms. But I want to thank you all so much for your input and what you all have given. And to our audience that are out there, please pray for your school counselors and for your counselors.
We are fine. We'll be fine.
No, Quincy, don't be talking about our prayers. Send that number up for your girl.
We came into this profession for a reason.
We did. Don't knock the prayers.
But send the timber up for your girl.
You can pray for us. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not blocking the blessing. But we came into this profession. I'm going to speak for them. Well, I'm going to speak for myself. Sorry. We came into this profession knowing that this is what it was.
Yes,
yeah.
And if you didn't know, you didn't stick around, because I know some people that couldn't handle it.
Yeah,
I've been doing this for 12 years.
This is true. This is true. This is why we weren't built to break, but a little extra sauce ain't gonna hurt nobody. Okay.
No, not at all. Prayer is good for anything. You know what I'm saying? So
send the timber up.
Definitely pray for us.
Send it up. They need them. But no, this has been amazing. Even just how far counseling has gone. You know what I mean? In just a matter of like 10 years or so, just the fact that people are seeking it more, that speaks a lot. That speaks some high volumes. And I will say, I will say, just from just seeing things, unfortunately, it seems like this mental health issue is not going to go away, and it's going to become even bigger within these next few years because of everything, even just as a world and as a nation that we've endured. We're just going to need to remember all of this and to know, and especially as Christians, because we will say, pray to the Lord in a heartbeat. Jesus and therapy can go together, and they go together nicely.
Yeah.
So even as Christians, do not downplay therapy and talking to people. So
faith without works is dead.
Say it again.
And they called him a mighty counselor for a reason. So
say what?
They called him the mighty counselor for a reason. So listen.
And there are Christian-based, faith-based therapists
Say that.
that you can go see. And I know of some Black ones too. So.
Yeah, we have to kind of tiptoe around. Sometimes it trickles in. I got to make sure I'm, touch base with the parents.
Yeah,
because we, as school counselors, we have to watch that. But if I have rapport. I try to gain as much of a rapport as possible with my parents, and so when that comes into play, sometimes it can trickle in if depending on the parent I'm dealing with. So
yeah. I pray for all my clients. Listen here, I intercede for them. Whenever anytime, I'd be like, okay, in this 20-minute intercession before my next session, I cry out their name, because between suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, I'm like, look here, no, you won't, devil, because this one is marked. And if you put them in my care, then that must mean deliverance is on the horizon. So,
amen.
So whether or not we can say it officially in session, listen. I'll be saying it in my mind. I'll be like,
I was about to say, you may not have the same. Well, it depends, I guess, on the clients. You may not have the same.
It depends. And so if they introduce it, because I do have some Christian clients, and so we are able to kind of go flowing from their spirituality, and we talk about the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit is our comforter and all that. So I have had clients, and once they intro it, then I pick up right where they are. But yeah, all of that, you got to be cognizant of that, ethical codes and all that. No liability. Ain't gonna compromise this license. God gave me wisdom. Okay, work too hard. Okay,
can't lose my good government job.
Well, that brings us completely to the end of our discussion. Like I said before, I thank you all so much for what you all have given. This is
wonderful.
Yeah,
thank you.
And feel free to, if there's a part 2, by all means, give me a call.
All right, we can do that. We can do that. All right, FC3 and family, we want to say thank you and good night. We pray that you have an amazing week. And y'all be safe, and don't forget your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Practice it.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.